You know that feeling, right, when you really want to connect with someone, maybe at a party or even just chatting with a new colleague. But then that little voice inside just starts whispering doubts, telling you you're going to say the wrong thing or, look awkward.
Oh, absolutely. We've all been there.
Yeah, craving those easy, confident social moments, but feeling held back by nerves, uncertainty.
Right.
What if we could turn down that inner critic, step into those situations feeling more, well, ourselves?
That's exactly what we're digging into today.
This deep dive is all about giving you those practical mental shifts, those real insights to do just that.
Precisely. We've looked at, the science behind social confidence, explored some powerful tools like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and mindfulness practices too, drawing from research, practical strategy.
So what's the plan?
Our mission today really is simple. We want to equip you with the knowledge and, importantly, actionable techniques to help you move from feeling maybe socially overwhelmed to genuinely empowered, ready to connect with more confidence, more authenticity.
Okay, let's get right into it then. When we talk about feeling anxious socially, is that the same thing as social anxiety? Because lots of people get nervous sometimes, right? Is there a key difference?
There really is, yeah. Social anxiety disorder, or SAD, it's more than just, feeling shy now and then.
Okay.
It's an intense, persistent fear of being watched or judged or evaluated by other people. And this fear isn't just occasional. It can really interfere with daily life.
How so?
Well, it can impact work, relationships, even just routine activities. What's important to understand, I think, is that SAD has real psychological roots, even biological ones sometimes.
Right.
Which means it's something that can be addressed. It's not just, oh, that's just my personality. Understanding that alone can be a huge step towards feeling more in control. It's empowering.
Okay, so what kinds of situations are we talking about here? The ones that trigger this really intense anxiety. It's not just giving big speeches, is it?
No, not at all. Public speaking is definitely a common one, sure. But SAD can pop up in lots of everyday social situations. Or performance ones.
Like what?
Well, think about meeting new people, going on dates, job interviews maybe, answering questions in meetings or, in class. Even things like eating or drinking in public or using public restrooms for some people.
Wow, okay.
And yeah, for some, the anxiety might be really specific to performance situations like, say, musicians on stage rather than just casual chatting.
And sometimes just the thought of having to be in those situations can be enough to make someone feel really anxious. Is that part of it too?
Absolutely. That's called anticipatory anxiety. And it can be a really significant part of SAD, actually.
Okay.
People can spend weeks, literally weeks, worrying about some upcoming social event. And this worry, it actually makes the experience feel worse, or at least you perceive it as worse.
Which then just feeds back into the fear.
Exactly. It reinforces the fear and anxiety around future events. It becomes this self-perpetuating loop, a bit of a cycle.
It seems like it could be really draining. When does this usually start for people, like SAD?
The onset is typically in late childhood or adolescence. And interestingly, it's seen more often in females during those years. And without any kind of intervention, it's important to know that SAD can stick around for a long time.
Yeah.
Potentially, throughout a person's life.
So if someone is experiencing this, what might they actually feel or, do in those situations? What are the signs we should look out for?
Yeah, the symptoms can show up in different ways. Physically, you might notice things like blushing, sweating, maybe trembling, a racing heart, nausea sometimes, or that feeling of your mind just going completely blank.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
Right. Behaviorally, it can look like difficulty making eye contact, feeling really uneasy around strangers, maybe avoiding social situations altogether. Sometimes people adopt a very stiff posture or speak in a really quiet voice. In kids, it might look like crying or freezing up or even having tantrums.
And cognitively, inside their head.
Yeah, cognitively, there's often a lot of worry leading up to social events, a really strong fear of being humiliated or embarrassed, constantly worrying about seeming, boring or stupid or incompetent.
Wow, it sounds like there's a lot going on, both inside and out. What actually causes all this? Is it just in our heads, or is there more to it?
We think it's likely a combination of things, really. There can be a genetic tendency. It does seem to run in families sometimes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, suggesting our genes might influence how the parts of our brain involved in fear and anxiety work. Stress and other environmental factors are also looked at. And, some people might have started out being shy and then it sort of developed into SAD, while others can't really remember a time they didn't feel socially anxious.
And I've heard that social anxiety often goes hand in hand with other mental health challenges. Is that common?
Yes, it's quite common, unfortunately. EST equally occurs alongside other anxiety issues like generalized anxiety or panic disorder, as well as mood disorders like depression.
Right.
It can also be linked to things like nicotine dependence or other substance use issues. What's interesting is that the social anxiety often shows up before these other conditions.
Oh, okay.
Which really highlights how important it is to address it directly. And, of course, if these other issues are present and aren't being treated, they can definitely make the social anxiety worse. So often a comprehensive approach is needed.
Okay, so we've got a clear picture of what social anxiety actually is. But what about those thoughts, the ones that really drive it? You mentioned these saboteurs within. What's that about?
Yeah, so at the heart of social anxiety, there's usually this really strong fear. Fear of being judged, embarrassed, or humiliated.
Right.
And this fear often feels way bigger than the actual situation warrants. It's powered by negative self-talk and what we call cognitive distortions.
Cognitive distortions, like
Yeah.
biased thinking.
Exactly. There's specific biased ways of thinking that really fuel the anxiety. And learning to recognize these patterns, that's the first really empowering step, taking away their power.
Okay, give us some examples of these thinking traps. I think that would really help people spot them in their own minds.
Absolutely. Okay. So one is negative interpretation bias. This is where you consistently jump to the worst possible conclusion about, say, ambiguous social signals.
Yeah.
Even if there's no real evidence.
Yeah.
Then there's mind reading. You assume you know what other people are thinking, and it's almost always negative. Like you're convinced that new person thinks you're boring.
Oh, yeah. I can see that one.
Right. Another big one is catastrophizing.
Yeah.
This is where you blow small social missteps, like way out of proportion, thinking one awkward comment in a meeting will just ruin your whole career.
Right, like the absolute worst case scenario.
Exactly. And the key thing with mind reading, for example, is realizing that most of the time, we're just projecting our own insecurities onto others.
Yeah.
Someone being quiet probably has nothing to do with us.
Those definitely sound familiar. What other kinds of thinking traps do we fall into?
Well, another common one is self-focused attention. This is when you become hyper-aware of your own actions, your internal sensations, like maybe your hands are shaking slightly, and you just assume everyone else is noticing and judging these things intensely. This creates a really negative cycle because the more you focus on yourself, the more anxious you get.
Right, makes sense.
Then there's confirmation bias. This is where you tend to latch onto any negative feedback, maybe even just a fleeting look you interpret negatively, while completely overlooking positive interactions or compliments.
So you only see what confirms your fear.
Precisely.
Right.
Personalization is another one. That's when you mistakenly blame yourself for negative events or other people's reactions that actually have nothing to do with you at all.
It's like our brains are actively looking for evidence to support our fears, isn't it? What are maybe a couple more of these tricky thought patterns?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, overgeneralization. This involves taking one negative social experience and using it to draw these broad negative conclusions about all future interactions. Like, I stumbled over my words in that one conversation, so I'm just bad at talking to people, full stop.
Right. One bad experience defines everything.
Exactly. And finally, there's all or nothing thinking, sometimes called black and white thinking. You see social situations as either a complete success, everyone loved me, or a total failure, everyone judged me harshly. There's no middle ground.
No gray area.
None. And these biases, they really twist how we see reality, amplify our self-doubt, and unfortunately, they make us want to avoid social situations even more. Often, the biggest fear isn't just being judged, but actually confirming those negative beliefs we already hold about ourselves.
And you mentioned negative self-talk earlier. How does that fit into this whole picture?
Right. Negative self-talk is like that constant internal commentator,
Yeah.
the voice in your head that reinforces these fears and negative self-perceptions.
Yeah.
A classic example might be something like, I always feel so awkward in groups, so there's just no point even trying to join in. This kind of inner voice really undermines any attempts we might make to engage socially. It keeps us stuck.
So it's like this double whammy, the bias, the thinking patterns, and then that critical voice in our head constantly backing them up. It sounds exhausting.
It really is.
What's actually happening in our brains when we're feeling all this social fear? Is there a biological basis?
Well, several brain areas are involved, but the amygdala plays a really key role. You can sort of think of the amygdala as your brain's internal smoke detector.
Okay.
It's always on the lookout for potential threats, especially things related to fear and anxiety. Now, in people with social anxiety, this system can become, let's say, extra sensitive.
Like overactive.
Exactly. It sounds the alarm even for social cues that aren't really dangerous. So an overactive amygdala is kind of like a hair trigger, making us perceive normal social situations as potential threats.
So it's like the alarm is constantly going off even when there's no real fire, basically. How does it decide what's a threat in social situations?
Well, the amygdala interprets social cues through an emotional lens. So if someone is already feeling anxious, maybe because of those cognitive distortions we just talked about, their amygdala is kind of primed. It's primed to see even neutral social signals, like maybe a fleeting facial expression or a brief pause in conversation, as negative or threatening. This then triggers a stronger anxiety response, which unfortunately just reinforces that whole cycle of fear.
That makes sense. It's like a feedback loop, keeping the fear going. Now, I also read something about the amygdala being connected to our social lives more broadly. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. Research has shown the amygdala is definitely involved in what scientists call the social brain. Studies have even found a link between the size of the amygdala and the size and complexity of someone's social network. Yeah, suggesting it plays a role in shaping how we interact socially. There's also a really fascinating case study of someone who had damage specifically to their amygdala.
What happened?
They showed a noticeable lack of fear, even in situations that would typically provoke it, including social ones. This further highlights its crucial role in our fear response. And, it kind of hints at how adaptable our brains can be, neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if actively engaging in more positive social interactions could actually help maybe retrain these brain regions over time.
That's really interesting. It almost suggests that our social experiences can actually change our brains.
Exactly. And here's another important piece. The amygdala isn't just about fear or punishment. It's also involved in processing rewards. So if social interactions consistently feel punishing because of anxiety, fear of judgment, the amygdala reinforces avoidance. But if we can find ways to make social interactions feel rewarding, maybe through small victories in facing our fears, or by building genuine connections, however small, then the amygdala can actually help reinforce those approach behaviors instead. So overcoming social anxiety isn't just about reducing fear, it's also very much about creating more positive social experiences.
Okay, so we've really dug into understanding social anxiety. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about building ourselves up from the inside out. What does it truly mean to have genuine self-confidence, and what are the essential building blocks?
Right. Authentic self-confidence, it isn't about being the loudest person in the room or, pretending to be someone you're not. It's more internal. It's dynamic. It's built on several interconnected pillars. And if one of these pillars is a bit weak, it can affect the others. So it's really about nurturing all of them together. True self-confidence involves recognizing both your strengths and your weaknesses, being open to learning and growth, having a sense of humility, actually. Knowing when it's okay to ask for support. It's deeply rooted in self-acceptance and self-kindness, embracing yourself, imperfections and all.
So what are these key pillars then, the ones that create this strong inner foundation?
There are four main ones we can focus on. The first is self-acceptance. This is about taking responsibility for your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, but without harsh judgment. It's allowing yourself to experience the full spectrum of emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, and understanding that imperfections are just a natural part of growth. It's about shifting from being your own harshest critic.
Which is so easy to do.
It is. Shifting from that to becoming your own biggest source of compassion.
That sounds like it could be a real game changer, especially for people who are used to beating themselves up. Okay, what's the next pillar?
The second is self-efficacy. Think of this as your belief in your own ability. Your ability to handle challenges, achieve goals, navigate tasks successfully. It's about feeling capable.
Okay, I can do this.
Exactly. And this grows when you set realistic expectations for yourself and then actually meet them. That builds a sense of competence and strengthens that belief in yourself.
Okay, so we have self-acceptance and self-efficacy. What's the third?
The third is self-compassion. And Dr. Kristen Neff, who's a leading expert in this field, has really defined it well. It has three key parts.
Okay.
First, self-kindness versus self-judgment. Basically, treating yourself with the same care and understanding you'd offer a good friend when you're struggling instead of being harshly critical.
That sounds Hard, but important.
It is. Second, common humanity versus isolation. This is recognizing that everyone struggles. Everyone makes mistakes. You're not alone in your imperfections. It connects you to others.
Right, it's not just me.
Exactly. And third, mindfulness versus over-identification. This means observing your negative thoughts and emotions with a sense of balance, neither suppressing them nor getting completely swept away by them. Self-compassion acts as a really important buffer against that negative self-judgment that often fuels social anxiety.
It sounds like self-compassion is really the key to softening that inner critic we talked about earlier. What's the final pillar then?
The last one is resilience. This is your ability to bounce back from difficulties, to recover fairly quickly from awkward social moments or, perceived rejections.
Okay.
It involves being committed to your goals, being willing to face challenges head on, and having a sense of control over your responses even when things are tough. Resilience is what stops a single negative social experience from completely derailing all your future efforts to connect and grow.
So these 4 pillars, self-acceptance, self-efficacy, self-compassion, and resilience, they form the foundation for feeling genuinely confident, not just like putting on a brave face. How do these actually help us when we're in social situations? What's the direct impact?
Well, they work together in really powerful ways. So self-acceptance and self-compassion, they directly lessen that fear of judgment. Because when you accept yourself, flaws included, and you treat yourself with kindness, the threat of what others might think becomes less significant, less central.
Right, you're not relying on their approval as much.
Precisely. This internal validation allows you to be more present and authentic in social interactions because you're less focused on seeking that external approval. Then you have social self-efficacy, that belief you can handle social situations. That reduces the anticipatory anxiety you talked about. It encourages you to participate more actively, breaking those old patterns of avoidance. It makes you think, okay, I can handle this.
That makes perfect sense. If you believe you can navigate a situation, you're much more likely to actually engage with it. And how does resilience fit in?
Well, resilience allows you to bounce back from those inevitable awkward moments or perceived rejections without taking them as like proof that you're somehow inadequate or flawed.
Right.
This is crucial because it prevents one bad experience from stopping you from continuing to put yourself out there and develop your social skills. Then you have related concepts like self-assertiveness and personal integrity. These enable you to express your true self and your needs respectfully, which leads to more genuine and often more rewarding interactions. And finally, things like living consciously and with self-awareness help you be more present in the moment, better able to read social cues, respond more effectively. Ultimately, authentic social interaction isn't just about learning a set of techniques. It's really an outcome of developing these internal pillars. It's about shifting from needing external validation to having a solid internal sense of self-worth.
Okay, so we're building this strong inner foundation. Now, how do we actually start using this in our day-to-day lives? What are some of those practical mental hacks and strategies we can use to navigate the social world with more assurance, more ease?
Right, let's get practical. Let's start with rewiring your thoughts. A core technique from CBT here is called cognitive restructuring.
Okay.
This basically involves learning to identify those negative thinking patterns that fuel social anxiety, then actively challenging them, and ultimately changing them. The key here is really recognizing that strong link between our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors.
Okay, this rewiring sounds important, but how do we actually do it? It doesn't sound like just flipping a switch in your head.
No, definitely not. The first step is becoming really aware of those distorted thoughts, those irrational beliefs, those automatic negative assumptions that just pop up in social situations.
Like the ones we talked about earlier, catastrophizing, mind reading.
Exactly. Overgeneralization, all or nothing thinking. Once you start noticing these, a really helpful technique is keeping a thought record or a journal.
How does that work?
You write down the specific situation, what thoughts and emotions came up for you. Try to identify which of those thinking traps you might have fallen into. And then this is key, the part to challenge those thoughts by coming up with more balanced or realistic alternatives. The very act of writing it down can create some psychological distance. It makes it easier to analyze your thinking patterns, almost like looking at data.
That sounds like a really practical first step, almost like gathering data on our own internal world. What other ways can we challenge these negative thoughts once we spot them?
Socratic questioning is another powerful tool. It sounds fancy, but it's basically asking yourself a series of guided questions to really examine the validity, the usefulness of your negative thoughts.
Like what kind of questions?
Questions like, okay, what's the actual evidence for this thought? Or what are some other possible ways to look at this situation? Or even, what's the absolute worst thing that could happen here, really? And how would I cope if it did?
These can help you see things from a different, more rational perspective.
Right. Kind of like being your own detective.
Exactly. You can also practice evaluating the evidence more objectively, just like a detective would. Considering alternative explanations for social cues, maybe that person looked away because they saw someone they knew, not because they were bored with you. You can even do a sort of cost-benefit analysis of holding on to those negative thought patterns. Like, what are they costing you in terms of opportunities or enjoyment? The ultimate goal is to replace those distorted thoughts with more realistic and balanced statements, aiming for genuine balance, not just trying to force superficial positive thinking.
That's an important distinction. Yeah. And there's simpler frameworks, too, like the ABCD model: adversity, beliefs, consequences, disputation, or the 3 Cs. Catch it, check it, change it. These can provide a structure to remember the process. And it's so important to remember, this is a skill. It develops over time with consistent effort and practice. You're literally building new neural pathways in your brain.
So it's a process that takes time and consistent effort, definitely not an overnight fix. You also mentioned adapting these techniques based on culture. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yes, that's really important. In some cases, standard CBT approaches might need a little tweaking. For example, if someone has experienced real discrimination or prejudice,
Right.
directly challenging their painful emotions might not be the most helpful first step. It could feel invalidating. Instead, the focus might initially be on validating those very real emotions, while still gently challenging any negative self-beliefs that arise in response to those experiences. It's about finding that nuanced balance, acknowledging real challenges without letting negative self-thoughts take complete control.
That makes a lot of sense. Being sensitive to individual experiences is key. Okay, so we're actively working on our thoughts. What about actually facing those social situations that make us anxious? The behavioral side.
Right. That's where behavioral activation and gradual exposure therapy come in. These are crucial behavioral techniques, also often part of CBT. The core idea here is that avoiding the things we fear actually strengthens that fear in the long run.
Which seems counterintuitive, but yeah.
It does. Exposure therapy helps to break that cycle by safely and, importantly, systematically reintroducing you to the very situations you tend to avoid.
Okay, that sounds really scary for a lot of people, honestly. How does deliberately putting yourself in those uncomfortable situations actually help? It seems like it would just make the anxiety worse.
It can feel scary at first, definitely, but it works through several powerful mechanisms. First, habituation. When you repeatedly face a feared situation without the feared negative consequence happening, the intensity of your anxiety naturally decreases over time. It's like your nervous system gets used to it and realizes, okay, this isn't actually dangerous. Second, extinction. This is where you weaken those learned associations between the feared situation and the negative outcomes you anticipate. When the catastrophes you dread don't actually happen, the fear response starts to fade.
Okay.
And importantly, successfully confronting your fears, even in small steps, significantly boosts your self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to handle challenging situations. You start building real-world evidence that you can cope.
So you prove it to yourself.
Exactly. And finally, exposure provides an opportunity for emotional processing. It allows you to experience the anxiety in a safe setting, learn new, more realistic beliefs about those situations, and become more comfortable with the feeling of anxiety itself, realizing it won't actually harm you.
So it's about actively proving to ourselves that our fears aren't as overwhelming or dangerous as we've perhaps built them up to be in our minds. How do we go about this exposure, though? Do we just, jump headfirst into our biggest fear? That sounds terrifying.
No, definitely not. For social anxiety, a graded exposure approach is usually the most effective and frankly manageable way to start.
Graded exposure.
Yeah. This involves creating what we call a fear hierarchy. It's essentially a list of your feared social situations, ranked from the least anxiety-provoking to the most anxiety-provoking for you.
Okay.
Then you begin by gradually confronting the situations that are lower down on your list, the ones that elicit only mild to moderate anxiety. As you become more comfortable with those situations and your anxiety in them decreases, you progressively move up the hierarchy to more challenging ones.
Step by step.
Exactly. This step-by-step approach is really key for building that self-efficacy and preventing you from feeling completely overwhelmed. Think of it like training for a race. You wouldn't start by trying to run a full marathon on day one, right?
Right. You'd start with shorter distances.
Precisely. You'd begin with shorter distances and gradually increase. Alongside this, we have behavioral activation. This involves actively encouraging yourself to engage in positive and rewarding activities, even if they involve some social interaction, to counteract that tendency to withdraw. And within these exposure exercises, you can also practice deliberate practice of specific social skills you want to improve, like, say, initiating small talk, and combining exposure with the cognitive restructuring we talked about earlier. That's incredibly powerful.
How so?
Because you can challenge your anxious thoughts before, during, and after the exposure exercise. It creates this really robust learning loop. You're tackling it from both the thought angle and the behavior angle.
That graded approach sounds much less intimidating, for sure. Yeah. Can you give us a concrete example, like what might a fear hierarchy look like for someone dealing with social anxiety?
Sure, absolutely. Let's imagine their hierarchy might start with something relatively low anxiety, like making brief eye contact and offering a small smile to a cashier at the grocery store.
Okay, manageable.
Right. Maybe a step up would be asking a stranger for simple directions. Moving further up, it could be initiating a short, casual conversation with a coworker about, say, the weekend. Then maybe attending a small gathering with just a couple of close friends. Then perhaps speaking up just once during a low-stakes team meeting. After that, maybe attending a larger networking event, but just aiming to talk to one new person.
Okay, building up.
Exactly. Then maybe giving a short presentation to a small familiar group. And perhaps the highest level on their current hierarchy could be giving a formal presentation to a large audience. And for each step, it's helpful to set a specific achievable goal too, like maintain eye contact for 3 seconds or initiate one brief conversation.
That really helps to visualize how you can break down those big, overwhelming fears into much smaller, more manageable steps. Feels much more doable. Now, another concept I've heard a lot about, especially recently, is mindfulness. How can being more present in the moment actually help with something like social anxiety?
Yeah, mindfulness is incredibly relevant here. It's essentially about paying sustained, open, and non-judgmental attention to the present moment. And it can be incredibly beneficial in managing social anxiety, instead of trying to completely eliminate the anxiety.
Which might not even be possible.
Exactly. Mindfulness helps you to shift your relationship with it.
So it's more about learning to observe the anxiety without getting completely swept away by it.
Precisely. Mindfulness helps reduce social anxiety in several key ways. First, it increases your awareness that your thoughts are just thoughts. They're transient mental events, not absolute truths or accurate predictions of disaster. The non-judgmental aspect of mindfulness helps break that ingrained cycle of self-criticism that often goes hand in hand with social anxiety. You learn to observe without piling on judgment. And importantly, mindfulness practices things like focusing on your breath or doing body scan meditations can actually help to calm your nervous system directly, reducing the physical symptoms of anxiety.
And what about connecting with others?
Yeah, in terms of social connection, mindfulness cultivates a sense of presence. It helps you shift your attention outward, away from your own internal self-preoccupation, and towards the social environment and the person you're actually interacting with.
Right.
This naturally improves your ability to listen attentively to both their words and their nonverbal cues. It fosters genuine interest in what they're saying. And ultimately, this can reduce feelings of loneliness and isolation. Mindfulness-based interventions like ACT acceptance and commitment therapy have shown real effectiveness in reducing overall stress, anxiety, and depression, while also improving people's sense of social support.
So how can we actually start to integrate mindfulness into our daily lives, especially, when we're heading into or are in social situations?
There are many simple ways to start, really. Before walking into a social situation that you anticipate might be anxiety-provoking, you could just take a few slow, deep, grounding breaths. Really focus on the physical sensation of the breath moving in and out.
Okay.
During a conversation, try to consciously bring your attention to your senses. What are you actually hearing? What are you seeing? What are the other person's facial expressions and body language telling you?
Tuning in externally.
Exactly. When you notice anxious thoughts starting to bubble up, practice simply observing them without judgment, like watching clouds drift across the sky. They come, they go. Even in quiet moments during a conversation, maybe a brief pause, practice just being present with whatever is happening in that moment, including any feelings of anxiety, without letting those feelings dictate your actions or force you to flee. The aim isn't to eliminate the anxiety, but to be present with it, allowing you to still engage.
That sounds like a really helpful shift in perspective, learning to coexist with the anxiety rather than constantly fighting against it or letting it run the show. Now let's talk about how we present ourselves to the world, our physical selves. Does our body language really have as big an impact as people say?
Oh, absolutely. Nonverbal communication plays a remarkably significant role, both in how we are perceived by others and also in how social interactions actually unfold. There's research, suggesting that body language and vocal cues can sometimes have a much greater impact than the actual words we use.
Wow.
And interestingly, our own body language can also influence how we feel internally. You might have heard of power posing.
Yeah, Amy Cuddy's work.
Right. That research showed that adopting more expansive, confident postures can actually lead to feeling more confident and powerful. So it works both ways, affecting others and affecting ourselves.
That's fascinating. So what are some key nonverbal cues that tend to project confidence and maybe ease in social situations?
Okay, think about your posture. Standing tall and erect, not slumped. Sitting upright with your shoulders relaxed, not hunched. Your head position, keeping it level. Chin in a neutral position, not tucked down. Your walk. If you're moving around, aim for a dignified, easy pace. Good posture while walking. Pay attention to your hand gestures. Keeping your hands visible, using open gestures, palms up, sometimes indicates openness rather than hiding your hands in pockets or behind your back.
Okay.
Eye contact is crucial. Aim for a natural amount. Making comfortable contact without staring intensely or completely avoiding it. And it's good to be mindful of cultural differences here, too. Eye contact norms can vary.
Right.
And finally, your facial expressions. Genuine smiles really convey warmth and approachability, making sure your facial expressions generally match the tone of your conversation. And your vocal tone matters, too. A steady, clear, modulated tone supports confident communication. The real key, though, is congruence.
Congruence.
Yeah, making sure your verbal message and your nonverbal cues are aligned. That they're telling the same story. That's what builds trust and feels authentic.
So it's not just about the words we choose, definitely not. It's also about how we deliver them and what our bodies are communicating. Now let's move on to the actual art of connecting with people. How can we become better at building rapport, making those genuine connections?
Active listening and empathetic communication are absolutely foundational here. Not just for building rapport, but interestingly, they can also help reduce our own self-consciousness in social interactions.
How does that work?
Well, when you really focus your attention fully on the other person, you naturally shift some of that intense focus away from your own internal anxieties and worries.
Ah, okay. So what does active listening actually look like in a real conversation?
Active listening means being fully present with the person who's speaking. It involves minimizing distractions mentally and physically, paying close attention not just to their words, but also their nonverbal cues, right? Tone of voice, body language. It also involves maintaining appropriate eye contact, asking open-ended questions that encourage them to elaborate and share more, not just yes-no answers. Reflecting back or paraphrasing what they've said to check your understanding.
So what I hear you saying is...
Exactly. Or seeking clarification if anything they say is unclear. It's a very conscious effort to truly understand their message from their perspective.
And how does empathetic communication build on that foundation of active listening? Is it different?
It takes it a step further, yeah. Empathetic communication aims to truly sense and acknowledge the other person's feelings from their point of view, and then communicate that understanding back to them.
Okay.
So it involves really attending to what they're saying, trying to comprehend the underlying emotions, clarifying if needed, and then affirming or validating their emotions. You might say something simple like, wow, that sounds really frustrating, or I don't understand why you might feel that way.
Acknowledging the feeling.
Exactly. When people feel truly heard and their emotions are validated, it builds a really strong sense of trust and psychological safety. And that, in turn, leads to more authentic, maybe more vulnerable interactions on both sides.
It sounds like by really focusing on the other person and their experience, we not only build a stronger connection with them, but we also give ourselves a bit of a break from our own internal noise, our anxieties.
That's often exactly what happens, yes.
Now, social interactions, as rewarding as they can be, can also be really draining, right? Especially for those who experience social anxiety or maybe are more introverted. How can we effectively manage our social energy levels so we don't just burn out?
That's such an important point.
No.
Setting healthy boundaries is absolutely critical, not just for managing energy, but for building self-respect, which ultimately contributes to greater overall confidence.
Boundaries. What exactly do we mean by that in a social context?
Think of boundaries as the personal rules or limits you establish for what is acceptable and how others treat you, and also how you choose to respond in return. They define what's okay and what's not okay for you.
What are some of the key benefits of having clear, healthy boundaries in our social lives? Why is it so important?
Oh, they offer a multitude of benefits.
Huh.
Firstly, they help protect your mental and emotional well-being by preventing you from getting overwhelmed or, taken advantage of. They also promote healthier, more respectful relationships because they set clear expectations. Boundaries are essential for preventing burnout and exhaustion, especially if you find social interaction tiring.
Right.
They enhance your self-esteem because setting them reinforces that your needs and feelings are valid and important, and they help you conserve your precious emotional energy for the interactions that truly matter to you. This is particularly important for introverts or anyone who experiences social fatigue.
It can be hard to set them, though, right? Especially if you worry about disapproval.
It absolutely can be challenging, especially for those with social anxiety due to that fear of disapproval or conflict. But here's the thing. Successfully setting and maintaining boundaries actually build confidence over time. It reinforces your self-worth and your fundamental right to have your needs met. Healthy boundaries aren't about being rigid or shutting people out. They're about fostering clarity, mutual respect, and ultimately more sustainable and fulfilling relationships.
That makes so much sense. It's about taking proactive steps to care for ourselves so that we have the energy and emotional capacity to engage socially in a way that feels good and healthy. Now, we've talked a lot about strategies for managing anxiety, building confidence. What about just being ourselves? How does authenticity play into all of this?
Authenticity, being true to yourself, openly sharing your genuine thoughts, feelings, experiences, it's absolutely key to forming deep and meaningful connections with others.
But that can feel really vulnerable, right? Especially if you fear judgment.
Absolutely. It can feel incredibly daunting for those with social anxiety who fear judgment. But paradoxically, it's often that very authenticity that helps to disarm fear and build genuine rapport. And personal storytelling can be an incredibly powerful mental hack for fostering this authentic connection.
Interesting. How can we use personal storytelling effectively then to connect with others on a more genuine level without feeling like we're oversharing or being boring?
Yeah, good question. Effective storytelling for connection often involves starting with your why, like what's the personal meaning or significance of this story for you.
Okay.
It's often about revealing some kind of change or growth you experienced, genuinely sharing your emotional responses throughout the story. How did you feel? Using specific, vivid details makes it engaging and unique, not generic. You want to try and take the listener along with you on the journey, maybe using present tense sometimes, or including dialogue. It's also important to help them understand why the story matters. What's the underlying message or feeling you want to convey? And try to end with a strong conclusion that reflects the change or learning you experienced. The most effective stories weave in lessons naturally, rather than feeling preachy.
What does the research say about this, about socially anxious people sharing?
Well, interestingly, research actually suggests that when individuals with social anxiety do engage in self-disclosure through storytelling, it's often perceived positively by others. It can actually improve their likability. Often our fear of boring others is a significant overestimation.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Authentic storytelling bypasses superficiality. It creates a space for vulnerability and shared human experience. And practicing storytelling in lower-stakes environments, maybe with a trusted friend first, can be a great way to build confidence for sharing more authentically in more challenging situations. It's almost like a form of gradual exposure for vulnerability itself.
So it's about having the courage to show up as our real selves, vulnerabilities and all, and connecting with others through those shared human experiences. Now, let's move on to some specific social situations that often trip people up. Like, how can we approach breaking the ice, initiating conversations with new people without feeling totally awkward?
Ah, yes. The fear of approaching new people and starting conversations is so common. Preparation can be incredibly helpful here, especially for more structured events, like networking things.
What kind of preparation?
Doing a little research maybe on who might be attending or what the likely topics of conversation will be. Having a brief elevator pitch about yourself ready, just a sentence or two. Even practicing a few different ways to introduce yourself can significantly reduce that fear of feeling unprepared or put on the spot.
Okay.
And remember the start small principle we talked about with exposure. Begin with one-on-one interactions if possible, or smaller, less intimidating groups. Your body language is absolutely key here too.
Right, the nonverbals. Yeah.
Exactly. Making comfortable eye contact, offering a genuine smile, having an open and relaxed posture. All of that signals approachability. As for actual icebreakers, simple observations about the environment or the event can work well. Offering a genuine compliment, but keep it light. Asking open-ended questions is a great strategy to get a conversation flowing. You could try using the F4D technique as a starting point, asking about family, occupation, recreation, or dreams. Not like an interrogation, obviously, just natural points of connection.
Okay.
And always stress the importance of active listening right from the start. Shifting your focus outward by asking follow-up questions takes the pressure off you to carry the entire conversation. And it helps build genuine connection. Remember, conversations are usually reciprocal. As you show interest in others, they'll likely show interest back.
What about those awkward silences, though? They can sometimes feel like they stretch on forever in conversations, especially when you're feeling anxious. How can we navigate those with a bit more grace?
Oh, the dreaded awkward silence. Yeah, they're a pretty universal experience, but anxiety definitely amplifies how negative they feel. First step, try to reframe silence in your mind.
How?
Sometimes it just means the other person is thinking, or perhaps they feel comfortable enough in the conversation that a constant stream of chatter isn't necessary. It doesn't automatically mean you've failed.
Okay.
When a silence does occur, take a moment. Observe the other person's nonverbal cues. Do they look uncomfortable too, or do they seem relaxed? Ground yourself in the present moment. Maybe subtly focus on the feeling of your feet on the floor. Take a slow, deep breath to help calm any rising anxiety. Consciously try to manage any anxious thoughts telling you the silence is your fault or means something terrible. And know that it's perfectly acceptable to take a brief moment to gather your thoughts before responding or steering the conversation in a new direction.
Are there proactive things we can do to restart the conversation?
Definitely. You could try what's called a callback, referring back to a topic you were discussing earlier. Like you mentioned earlier about X, I was wondering. You could ask for their thoughts or opinions on something related to the current topic. You could reveal something small about yourself related to what you were just discussing. If you're in a group, you could try to bring another person into the conversation by asking for their perspective. Or you could even use your immediate environment comment on the music, the food, something happening nearby.
Having a few options ready.
Exactly. Having a few of these go-to strategies in mind can really reduce the fear of the silences happening. And remember, sometimes a strategically used silence can actually project thoughtfulness. It doesn't always have to be filled.
Good point. And what about when things don't go perfectly? How can we handle criticism or maybe even rejection in a way that's constructive and doesn't completely shatter our confidence?
Right. It's so important to acknowledge that experiencing criticism and rejection is, frankly, an inevitable part of life and social interaction. The goal isn't to avoid them entirely, that's impossible. It's about learning how to process them constructively without letting them define your sense of self-worth.
So what are the steps?
Start by allowing yourself to acknowledge your feelings without judgment. It's okay to feel disappointed or hurt or embarrassed. Practice self-compassion. Offer yourself kindness and understanding in that moment, just like you would a friend. Engage in self-care activities that help you regulate your emotions and bring you comfort. Mindfulness can also be really valuable here for enhancing emotional balance and perspective. Then, try to engage in some reframing and cognitive strategies.
Like challenging thoughts again.
Yeah. Reflect on the experience objectively. What, if anything, can you actually learn from it? Actively challenge any negative thoughts that arise. This means I'm a total failure. Try to reframe the rejection or criticism in a more balanced way, focusing on your positive qualities and strengths too. Try to maintain a positive overall outlook. See the experience as temporary, not a permanent reflection of who you are. Developing that growth mindset we touched on is key here.
Seeing it as feedback.
Exactly. View criticism and rejection as opportunities for learning and improvement, not as final verdicts. Behaviorally, consider seeking support. Talk to trusted friends, family, or a professional. Stay open to new opportunities. Don't let one negative experience prevent you from continuing to put yourself out there. And in the case of criticism, learning to communicate your own perspective assertively and respectfully can also be really empowering.
Now, social situations aren't all the same, are they? How should our approach to building confidence and connecting maybe differ between something like a formal networking event versus, say, a casual social get-together with friends?
That's a really important distinction to make, yes. The context matters. Networking events often have a more explicitly professional purpose, right? So preparation becomes even more key.
Right.
Think about why you're there to make professional connections, exchange ideas, explore career opportunities. Before you go, do some research if you can. Prepare that concise elevator pitch. Set a few specific, achievable goals. Maybe talk to 2 new people in my field. Take care of practicalities, business cards, appropriate dress. During the event, maybe be strategic about timing. Arriving a little early or staying a bit later can sometimes allow for less chaotic conversations. Be mindful of your body language signal approachability. When you do talk to someone, focus on active listening. Ask open-ended questions that focus on their needs and interests, not just yours. Be prepared to share concisely about yourself, too. Boost your confidence beforehand, maybe visualization, reminding yourself of strengths. Start small if you're nervous. And crucially, follow up afterwards with personalized emails or LinkedIn requests if you made a good connection.
Okay, so networking is more structured, more goal-oriented. What about casual gatherings?
Casual social gatherings, on the other hand, are generally focused more on enjoyment, relaxation, building personal connections. Preparation is usually less formal. Maybe just thinking of a few general conversation starters is enough.
Right.
During the event, the priority is more on being present, genuinely enjoying the company, focusing on authentic connections. Small talk is perfectly acceptable, and authenticity is often highly valued. Again, your body language, smiling, appropriate self-disclosure can help build rapport. Here, the focus is much more on shared enjoyment and getting to know people on a personal level.
So the hack is adapting.
Exactly. Adapt your approach. Maybe have a slightly different, more natural answer ready for the what do you do question in a casual setting. Use graded exposure principles here, too. Maybe start by just chatting with people you already know at a party before approaching someone new. Ultimately, the most effective strategy for both networking and casual gatherings is often shifting your focus away from your own self-evaluation and performance and towards genuine curiosity about others. Approach interactions with a mindset of learning and connecting, rather than as a performance you need to ace.
Okay, so we've gathered all these amazing tools and insights. This has been so helpful. What's the real secret, then, to making this social confidence something that actually lasts, not just a temporary boost?
I think the key to lasting social confidence really lies in the compound effect. It's not about one big heroic act. It's about the consistent application of small, positive actions and the reinforcement of those actions over time.
Small steps adding up.
Exactly. Make a conscious effort to regularly practice those new social behaviors, those cognitive techniques we've discussed, even when it feels small or insignificant. And remember to actively celebrate your small wins, no matter how tiny they seem. Acknowledge them.
Why is celebrating wins so important?
It helps to reinforce your self-confidence and your positive beliefs by tapping into your brain's natural reward system. It makes the positive changes stick. It's also crucial to be patient and practice that self-compassion, especially during setbacks, because setbacks will happen.
Right.
View them as learning opportunities, temporary bumps in the road, rather than as proof that you're inadequate or that this stuff doesn't work.
Yeah.
And always remember the importance of gradual progress. Start with achievable goals that align with your graded exposure hierarchy. Consistency is key.
It really sounds like it's a journey of continuous growth, doesn't it, rather than some overnight transformation. What role does our overall mindset play in this long-term process?
Embracing what Dr. Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset is absolutely crucial for this journey. This is the fundamental belief that your abilities, including your social skills, aren't fixed. They can be developed and improved through effort, learning, and using effective strategies.
As opposed to a fixed mindset where you think, I'm just bad at this.
Exactly. A fixed mindset assumes your abilities are largely set in stone. Applying a growth mindset to your social interactions means viewing social skills as learnable. Seeing challenges not as threats, but as opportunities for growth. Learning from perceived failures or rejections, seeing them as valuable feedback, not verdicts. Persisting through setbacks. Valuing the effort you put in and the strategies you use. Actively seeking and utilizing feedback from positive social experiences. And finding inspiration, rather than intimidation, in the social successes of others.
Is there a practical way to foster that?
One really helpful linguistic hack here is using the power of yet. When you find yourself thinking, I can't do that, just add the word yet to the end.
Right.
I can't comfortably handle large groups yet. Or I don't know how to start conversations with strangers yet. This simple word reframes perceived limitations as current states that are open to development. It implies future possibility.
I like that, the power of yet.
Yeah. And a growth mindset also involves being open to alternative interpretations of other people's behavior, which helps challenge those negative assumptions we talked about. Without a growth mindset, setbacks in your CBT or exposure work can be easily misinterpreted as personal failures, which can really hinder your progress.
This idea of a growth mindset feels incredibly empowering and applicable to so many areas of life, not just social skills. Now, what if we're putting in the effort, using these strategies, but still feeling really stuck or overwhelmed? When is it maybe a good idea to reach out for professional help?
That's a really important question. Seeking professional help is absolutely a sign of strength and self-awareness. It's a valuable step if you find that self-help strategies alone just aren't providing sufficient relief or change.
What are some signs it might be time?
Some indicators could be experiencing persistent and overwhelming social anxiety that significantly interferes with your daily functionings at your work and rover, school, relationships. If you're noticing physical health impacts related to the anxiety, if you're experiencing constant, unmanageable worry about social situations, if you find yourself engaging in significant social avoidance, that's really limiting your life. If you're using substances like alcohol to cope with social situations, if your sleep is being disrupted due to anxiety, or if you have pervasive feelings of hopelessness or worthlessness alongside the anxiety.
What kind of help is out there?
There are several types of professional help that can be really beneficial. Individual therapy is a big one, things like CBT, ACT, DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, IPT, interpersonal therapy. Group therapy can also be incredibly helpful for social anxiety.
Right, practicing in a safe space.
Exactly. Medication can also be a helpful adjunct to therapy in some cases, often prescribed by a psychiatrist or doctor. And for individuals experiencing maybe more subclinical levels of social anxiety who are looking specifically to develop skills and boost confidence, working with a coach specialized in this area can also be beneficial.
So there are options.
Definitely. Remember that seeking help is a proactive step towards well-being. It provides you with tailored tools, support, and a non-judgmental space to work through your challenges. Therapy in particular can really help build those foundational pillars of self-confidence we discussed, leading to more sustainable long-term change. Different approaches offer different mental hacks tailored to your specific needs.
It's really important to know that support is available, and reaching out is a positive, proactive step towards feeling better. To kind of bring everything we've discussed to life, could you perhaps share just a couple of brief, maybe anonymized examples of how these strategies can lead to real positive change for people?
Absolutely. Real stories are powerful. We've seen individuals, let's call one Sarah, who struggled with a significant fear of being scrutinized, both at work and socially. Through a combination of CBT techniques challenging those thoughts, plus gradual exposure to feared situations, like speaking up in meetings and incorporating mindfulness practices, she was able to significantly reduce her anxiety over time. She engaged much more confidently and, importantly, authentically in her interaction.
That's great.
Then there was a case, let's say patient a middle school student who had intense social anxiety related to living in a dormitory. A structured CBT intervention focused on managing his anxiety arousal, learning calming techniques, shifting his attention outward, using graded exposure for things like initiating chats with roommates, cognitive restructuring for his negative thoughts, and reducing his reliance on safety behaviors, like avoiding eye contact. This led to a marked improvement in his comfort and participation in dorm life. We also heard about Randy Weiss, a musician who developed debilitating performance anxiety. By consciously applying a growth mindset, really believing he could improve viewing challenges as opportunities, and using specific strategies to manage his pre-performance nerves, he was able to overcome his anxiety and rediscover his joy in performing.
Wow.
And one more, maybe Matt, who had always struggled with feeling like an outsider. By focusing intentionally on building self-acceptance and practicing vulnerable self-disclosure, starting small with close relationships, he was able to build deeper connections and experience a much greater sense of belonging and self-worth.
What do these examples show us?
They really highlight a few common themes, I think. The power of experiential learning, directly challenging fears, and discovering they often don't come true or aren't as bad as expected. The benefit of sharing authentically with others, even when it feels risky. And the effectiveness of using a multifaceted approach, often combining cognitive shifts with behavioral changes, sometimes with professional support to guide the process.
These real-life examples are so encouraging. They really illustrate that positive change is absolutely possible, even if it takes time and effort. So as we bring this deep dive to a close, what's the most important message you want our listeners to remember as they continue on their own journey towards greater social confidence?
I think the most important thing is that the journey to social confidence is ultimately about transforming your relationship with fear, not necessarily about eliminating it entirely. Fear might still pop up, but it doesn't have to control you.
Okay.
Remember the vital importance of understanding the roots of social anxiety so you know what you're working with. Actively building those core pillars of self-confidence from within, acceptance, efficacy, compassion, resilience, and consistently applying the actionable mental hacks we've explored. Things like cognitive restructuring, gradual exposure, mindfulness, paying attention to your body language, practicing active listening, setting healthy boundaries, and embracing authentic storytelling.
It's a toolkit.
It really is. Adapt your strategies to fit different social situations. Make a commitment to consistent practice, even small practices. Celebrate every single small victory along the way. Cultivate that growth mindset that embraces learning and resilience. And please don't hesitate to seek professional support when you feel you need it. That's a sign of strength.
Yeah.
Embracing your authentic social self takes courage, it takes self-compassion, and it takes consistent effort. But the rewards, greater ease, more confidence, genuine connection in your social world, they are truly worth it.
That's such an empowering and hopeful message to end on. Thank you. So as you, our listener, go about your week, I want you to think about this. What is one small, actionable step you can take, maybe starting today, maybe this week, towards greater social freedom and confidence in your own life?